Here's how 15-time world champion Joe Davis changed snooker forever despite never having played a shot on a colour TV. So after making this video I found this one piece of grainy footage from a documentary in the 70s. Don't you just hate it when that happens? Anyway, this is Break From Life. Welcome back, and if it's your first time watching one of our videos, then it's fantastic to have you here. Back in the 1920s there was no snooker championships, and that's why Joe began his career playing English billiards.
Well, here they go, with a delicate touch that the nimblest pickpocket might envy.
And Joe was a fantastic billiards player, becoming a 4-time world champion. So why then nowadays is an English billiards table mostly used for playing snooker? To understand why, you first need to know how billiards is played, so luckily I've managed to dig out some old archive footage that explains just that. Alas, a billiard table and its multitude of cue balls that are divided up evenly between both of the combatants. And if we should want to make the challenge more strenuous, we should add a ball of red colour if only we could. Now for the demonstration. I say over there, isn't that young upstart off that extraordinary piece of worldwide equipment? Yes, you there. Come this instant, there is much to be done already. Cracking stuff. Now this talented young fellow is going to show us how to play some basic shot. Yes, podding the red into the corner pocket. Flawlessly played, advancing in the sum of 3 points. But sadly his opponent's ball nets him a mere 2. Not to worry, young lad, there are many more shots to be shown, aren't there? Like going in off his opponent's white for the score of 2. Or the same shot off the red that benefits him to the tune of 3 points. And then of course there is the cannon, making him the victor of the spoils of 2 more points. Jolly good show. Okay, sorry if that confused anyone, but this game actually had a serious problem. This is Walter Lindrum, and he was unbelievably good at playing touch cannons. By playing these delicate little nursery cannons, he was able to amass breaks of over 4,000. Not only could Joe not compete against this, losing in the final 2 years running, it also didn't make much of a spectacle. But this was the direction the game seemed to be taking, and even new rule changes didn't have much of an effect. I mean, this was something any idiot could do. It was time for a new kind of cue sport.
Joe will now entertain you with a demonstration game of snooker.
Joe helped organise and went on to win the first Snooker World Championships in 1927, for which he was awarded £6 and 10 shillings that he used to buy the then and current trophy. And unlike billiards, where he was one of the best players in the world, at snooker he was almost unbeatable. He'd made the highest breaks in the world, the most amount of century breaks in the world, as well as being able to play left and right-handed. Unsurprisingly, Joe won the first 15 World Championships, with the closest match being against his brother Fred, where he won 37 frames to 36. Unsurprisingly, Joe's technique was very similar to that of a current professional. Ideally, when you're down on the shot and your tip's up to the cue ball so it's nearly touching it, you want this arm to be pointing down vertically towards the floor, keeping your head on the cue. Joe always said that it was doing this for all these years that had worn a groove into his chin. Joe's cue and cue arm were always over and above the line of the shot, meaning he found it easier to deliver the cue in a perfectly straight line. Probably the most vital part of your entire cue action is your wrist. The way it moves and interacts with your grip can have a massive effect on the result of any shot. Ideally, this means using your wrist and fingers to keep your cue as level as possible without creating too much of a seesaw motion. But the main thing is to prevent it from having too much of a twisting action when you strike the ball. Any rotating motion can cause your technique to be inaccurate and very unpredictable. Now, everybody will probably find that they rotate the cue a little bit when they play any shot. But generally, if you can see that you're not rotating the cue before or after you play the shot, you're going to be able to play shots that require a greater level of accuracy and be able to play more consistently. Nathan is from Bridlington in the UK. Joe always realised that the stance was an absolutely vital part of the game, but his stance was a little bit different to the modern players you see today. In order to keep still and as low to the table as possible, Joe leaned a lot of weight forward onto his left arm and left leg, which differs drastically from a square-on stance that you see most professional players using today. Now, there's no real right or wrong answer to how to do this, but ultimately Joe's probably sacrificed a small amount of comfort for some insignificant benefits, like keeping a lot of your weight forward on your bridge hand. Joe actually used a fairly standard bridge, and to do this all you need to do is place your hand on the table, lift your knuckles up and bring your thumb in. You can then rest your cue between your thumb and your hand and move it smoothly backwards and forwards. But Joe didn't just use this bridge. When he was playing certain screw shots, he'd occasionally used a loop bridge. Again, this was probably to keep his cue as horizontal to the table as he could, which again isn't necessarily a huge benefit. To do this, he'd place his hand flat on the table, his cue against his thumb, and wrap his index finger round the cue. Something else he did, which is a little different to today, is play with a straight bridge arm. Most players now will bend their bridge arm to get themselves closer to the cue ball. However, this has more and more of an effect the taller you are, and Joe wasn't really that tall, so it probably didn't have that much of an effect on him. However, it was things like this that did cause a problem for other players at the time. You see, if this technique resulted in you not sighting the ball correctly, for example, then really you only had two options. Use an alternative technique to someone who is currently by far the best player in the world right now, or use a technique that just simply won't really work for you. Now, if you do want to find out more about how to sight the ball correctly, please give this video in the card right now a watch before you make any adjustments, because it can go horribly wrong. Clayton is from Johannesburg in South Africa. What's very noticeable if you watch Joe play enough is he doesn't walk into his shots, which is a massive contrast to a professional snooker player of today like Shaun Murphy, who very deliberately walks into every shot. What's interesting about this is the better you get at snooker, the less of an effect this will have on you. And this may go a long way to showing how good Joe actually was. You see, it's a lot easier when you're playing a shot to stand back from it so you can see the entire table, and this gives you a lot better idea of exactly what you're going to do if you're standing on the line of the shot. But first, Ship to Shore Custom Builders are in Maui, Hawaii. You can think of the line of the shot as going straight back from the object ball through the cue ball and down onto the floor. If you walk into this line from an angle, it can be difficult to get your body in the right position and bring your cue in straight. It's much better to stand back from the shot and walk in, bringing your head and cue in on this line. This means it's not only easier to set up your entire technique in the right position, but you're also viewing the shot with a consistent perspective. Where you stand relative to this line is absolutely critical as well. You see, most players usually hold their cues close to their bodies, meaning the direction you're going to play the cue ball in is entirely set by the position you stand in. So if you're struggling to pot consistently, it's worth working out the exact place you need to stand to bring your cue in exactly on the line of the shot. Because if you can keep your cue parallel with the line of the shot, you're going to pot the vast majority of the shots you go for. Daniel is from Moscow in Russia. After being world champion for 20 straight years, you can probably say Joe sort of semi-retired, but he was still playing in exhibitions and he was the first player to make a break of
made 147.
So it was at this stage that Joe began promoting a new game, Snooker Plus. But what was it and how was it different to snooker? This game had an extra orange coloured ball worth 8 points and an extra purple coloured ball worth 10 points. You see, in snooker, everybody had been talking for quite a long time about what the record was for the highest break. And now the highest break possible had been made, something had to change. What this would have meant with the highest value ball being spotted at the other end of the table to the reds is it was very unlikely that anyone would ever make a maximum break. And I think Joe himself saw this as a further mountain that he hadn't yet conquered. The problem was, by this stage, Joe had done such a good job promoting snooker both on and off the table that no one really saw any need to change it. And as it went into colour, this sport was already perfect for a TV audience, where people weren't just excited about making a 147 break, they were also excited about how quickly you could make one. But ultimately, Joe not only pioneered the game, but was also considered the greatest player to have ever played it up until the early 1980s. And that's how Joe Davis changed snooker forever.
That's snooker, that was.
If you want to find out more about how people change snooker forever, then why not try our video about Stephen Hendry? Or if you want to know how difficult some of the shots from the World Championships actually were to play, then try our Shot of the Championships video. And remember, don't just watch, play, and make the commitment to becoming a better player by subscribing to the channel. See you.